Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Big Jiu-Jitsu Show. I'm Rob.
I'm Randy.
And today we have another guest. We have Mr. Aaron Fears with us today, coming to talk to us about a couple topics. Kind of discussed it a little bit before the episode started, but before we get fully started, Aaron, can you give us like an introduction, your martial arts background, things of that nature?
Yeah, yeah. So my name's Aaron. I've been training in martial arts, man, pretty much my entire life. Yeah, I tell people like my motivation was season one of the Power Rangers. So back in 1993, I was just watching it on Saturday morning, and I was like, told my mom, I was like, that's what I want. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to be. So got started in karate. And I would do karate like in between sports, so like karate, go to soccer, karate, go back to, track or soccer or football, whatever it was. And then did all that through high school. And then when I got to college, took a long break. Just I was playing college football and just didn't have the time to dedicate to training. But once I was done, I was kind of knew that I wanted to get back into it just to stay in shape. I'm not a treadmill kind of guy. I'm not trying to be out there running, even sprints as much as I had to do that for football. But when I was done, went back to my old gym in my hometown. We had transitioned to teaching a combination of like Muay Thai and Krav Maga. So did that for a bit, then moved to Raleigh, North Carolina in 2014. Knew I wanted to continue training, found a Krav Maga gym, and then it was probably about 3 years into that. I just wanted to kind of expand my training base. So I started visiting some MMA gyms in the area. Took a couple of jiu-jitsu classes because I was actually inspired by the John Wick films at that point. I was like, that
Nice.
looks really cool. I want to do that. And man, like that first class, I just got bit with the bug. I was like, this is incredible. This is incredible. So that was 2017, and it's I've been hooked ever since.
That's awesome. I'm really glad somebody got inspired by the John Wick films for
Mm,
jujitsu because it was just, I will say, I do remember watching the second one in the theaters with my wife because there's a bit more jujitsu I felt in that one.
yeah, yeah.
And just when him and the guy that was trying to protect the lady had the fight like out in the street. And
Mm.
I'm basically just like grabbing her, like, look at what he's doing. Look at what he's doing. Like naming the move. And she's like, you shut the hell up, please. Just let me watch the film. And I'm freaking out about it.
Yeah,
So, but
yeah.
that's awesome. Another question I had, because I used to teach Taekwondo a long
Mm,
time ago, and we had people that would be like, okay, baseball season's coming up, gonna take my kid out of it.
yeah.
How did you find that going back and forth between the training? Do you feel like it was did you pick up kind of right where you left off, or did you have any issues jumping right back into it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't remember being like a steep learning curve. If anything, I feel like my time in other sports just helped me become more well-rounded. And I'm an advocate for this for any parents out there who are listening who have their kids in jiu-jitsu or other sports. Like when they're young, doing multiple sports, it just makes you a better athlete all around. So if anything, I feel like it helped me because you're developing other skills outside of the mat, and you're able to bring them back into like footwork and conditioning and a lot of other ways that it translates. So, and I never felt like I was behind the other kids. If anything, I feel like I had a step up because of just being able to pull from a different set of skills.
Right, like a lot of, explosive movement, stuff like that.
Hmm.
I'm not saying that martial arts can't get you in like really good shape, but kind of the same thing. I did wrestling and I did Taekwondo at the time, and like I felt a lot of my wrestling, even though it's two completely different like styles, basically. In my,
Right.
yeah, I still was able to pull a lot of the conditioning out of it. So like
Hmm.
sparring for a long time was not an issue or things of that
Yeah.
nature.
Yeah.
Well, I think some of it too is like you learn. I think if you're more athletic, you're going to be a faster learner when it comes to anything that's athletically based. I mean, there's like all kinds of
Hmm.
people that talk about how beneficial it is to put young kids in gymnastics early on.
Yeah.
So they learn body control and mobility, dexterity, and they really learn to control their own body. And when you talk about martial arts, I mean, we all apply it different ways, but you can tell when you get somebody that comes into martial arts brand new that has an athletic background, it's pretty apparent right out the gate.
Right.
Not that the non-athlete can't catch up and become an extremely talented martial artist, and we see examples of
Hmm.
that with like Mike Musumeci. He doesn't have an athletic background outside of martial arts. Obviously, he's phenomenal, but you can just tell the people that had a background in some kind of sports that then transferred over to martial arts. At least in my opinion, I don't know if that's been your experience as well, but
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. There's just I think a body awareness.
mm,
Your body awareness, even like spatial awareness. Uh, you know, Being a self-defense instructor, I see a lot of people who I can kind of tell like have never done anything athletic before, and just like telling them, "Hey, put your arm here, take this step here, do this," and like just to see them almost kind of glitching, like I don't know what you're saying. I don't have the neural pathways to actually make the two happen. So it matters. It matters. And yeah, and I think unfortunate that I think the way our technological society is kind of moving, like where kids are more on screens and less out in sports or just doing outside activities. Like you're starting to see kind of a lack of those physical capabilities that I think we had, 15, 20 years ago.
Well, then I think too, you don't have the analogy either. How
Yeah.
powerful is analogy for learning when you can take somebody that played soccer or football and you can say
Hmm.
like, I want you to push off the ground like you're getting ready to sprint. Well, if they've never
Right.
done a sprint before, then that analogy is kind of lost on them. And what are you going to say? Like, push on the pedal like you do when you're playing the video game at home. Like, I mean, there's no comparative
Yeah.
basis. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that becomes problematic too. So you said you played sports. You said football, soccer. What else?
Basketball and track.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of those, and most of our episodes are just audio, so they can't see. But like anybody that's had a chance to roll with you knows that you're built like Superman. So, I think that athletic background definitely helps you.
It does, man. It does. Yeah, Clark Kent. He's a role model for sure.
So teaching self-defense, right?
Hmm.
We were talking about a lot of like athleticism, things of that nature, really goes well with, doing, like sport jiu-jitsu or competitions of that nature. You already talked about kind of like some people don't have those body mechanics and stuff, but what kind of pathway do you look for people when you're trying to get them to kind of understand like I guess maybe help motivate them into like a self-defense mindset versus like an athletic mindset? Because like you were saying before, you get people come in there who don't have that athletic background, who've never,
Hmm.
run or whatever, played a sport, did anything.
Yeah.
Like, so what do you have like any ways you really kind of help people get into that? Maybe like you probably should work out a little bit if you want to have some
Yeah.
self-defense type stuff.
Yeah. 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 One slogan I'll often fall back on, I'll say, fitness is a part of fighting. So it's like, hey, if you're here, um, and this is usually this will be like after I've done like an intense part of the class where everyone's kind of breathing heavy now, and I'm like, hey, listen, like, let this be kind of a marker for you, like where you're at in terms of your physical capabilities. I think the average is at like a self defense or a unsanctioned violence. I think on average lasts like less than 60 seconds. I mean, it's crazy, right? But it's going to be all out. And so I kind of tell people, it's like, hey, you've got to have 60 seconds of all out in you. And if you don't, like, let this kind of be again, a marker to show you where you're at, because like being strong and having a gas tank matters. It matters in fighting. And so you owe it to yourself to do what you can do to be in the best shape that you can be in if something happens. Heaven forbid it does. But if it does, you're not going to want to be sucking wind. Right. So, and I kind of preface that, hey, listen, I realize, we've got people from, all different kinds of backgrounds, all different ages and different physical limitations. So do what you can do. Right. I'm not saying you need to go in the gym and be a power lifter. I'm not asking you to become an Olympic athlete. But give yourself an edge. Like you've got to have some, if someone's going to attack you, like you've got to have more than what they're coming with. And so, yeah, really that fitness is a part of fighting. And man, when we get on the mitts, oftentimes I'll do to start our classes, I'll have us do just some basic combos and go for about like 2 minutes, 2 minutes around. And man, people are, huffing and puffing. And I'm like, okay, listen, like keep like push it now. I know you came for a self-defense class, but I'm gonna train you like a fighter because that's what's gonna get you in the best possible condition if something happens.
That makes sense. Pardon me. And that's kind of so if I understand correctly, my brother-in-law is a Krav Maga instructor as well, and there's like no belt system in Krav, or it's just
It depends. Yeah, I mean, depends on what school you go to. Some do like levels, levels 1 through 5, and then there's like black belt. But again, every school kind of has their own take on it.
okay. And yeah, that was kind of going to lead me into my next question about kind of what's a motivating factor for people between, like, belts. Belts seem to be like a really
Yeah.
big thing too. Like, you've done jiu-jitsu for a while as well, and
Hmm.
some people get really hung up on like, well, I'm like a two-stripe blue belt, but like, that guy's a
Hmm.
one-stripe blue belt and I should be better or something along those lines, like, or just to get that extra piece of tape. And I've been through different schools where it's like, one, it's just straight nogi and everybody just comes to train and it's like either you get better or you don't.
Hmm.
Schools that no stripes for belts because stripes are for kids that they say, and then like schools that are just straight up giving stripes. Like what do you think some of the motivators outside of like belts, kind of look like what brings people back like
Yeah.
Krav that doesn't have belts or stuff like that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny in like self-defense, it's actually something that I've taken issue with. Is kind of the lack of motivation that I see from some people because we'll have some people come through for like an 8 week kind of boot camp and it's just test the waters, see if you like it, see what's what. And then they never come back. Or they'll go through like our level one, they'll kind of do it for a year or so, but then not come back. And I think that there's some of that across all of martial arts being, such a niche kind of hobby, right? But um I mean I'm like I really wrestle with it because I think some people think, oh, I did like the 8 weeks, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like I'm good. I don't want to get pushed. Um, I remember I had one guy come in asking about our studio, and he was like, "Yeah, I want to learn some stuff, but I don't want to get hit in the face." And I was like, this is the contact sport, quote unquote, right? We're talking about violence here. Like we spar and like we're going to be safe, but like you're not going to walk out here with a bloody nose. But like you don't want the first time you actually get hit to be when someone's really trying to do you harm. And so I think for the people who stick around, there's a deeper why than just a belt or a certificate, like the status. I remember one woman who came through our studio. She'd been assaulted when she was out on a run in I think it was Cary back in, man, this might have been like 2017, 2018. And she was, I would say, probably 5'3", all of 120 pounds. Not a big one. Very, young too. I think she just kind of graduated college. Um, but man, like when she would hit the pads, like there was intent.
Yeah.
There was intent, and there was like her whole demeanor would change. You could see it in her eyes. Like, you know, she was like, I'm gonna do what I can to not let this happen again. So there was something deeper than just I want to make myself safer. It's like it's this thing touched me.
Yeah.
Evil touched me. Like I've seen the dark side, and I know what I need to do in order to make myself as safe as I possibly can. So usually for the people who stick around, there's like a deeper why. They kind of see the reality of like violence and like want to be prepared for it. And I think for myself that's motivated my own training. And I think especially with jujitsu, I've always kind of had this sense of I want to be prepared not just for myself, but for someone else, right? That I think with my size and physicality and athleticism, I have an opportunity to use that to defend someone from violence. And if I have to use a measure of violence to do that, I'm willing. So for me, I think when I'm training and when I step on the mats, and Randy and I, we've had numerous conversations about this, but like those are things that are in my mind, which is I want to get as good at this as I possibly can, so that if something happens out there, I'm ready.
I think that's awesome, and we definitely have had a lot of discussions, and that's one of my one of my reasons why you're one of my favorite people in the gym to train with, because I feel like we're on the same wavelength about our intent, our reason to be on the mats all the time, working our ass off. It's not just about us. And I think that that's super powerful stuff, and that's why anytime anybody asks me for recommendation on purely they're in it for self defense, they had a bad experience, they want to make themselves safer, you're who I send them to, hands down. But it's and I think you're definitely onto something there. When you look at belts and how that influences, whether it's intrinsic, extrinsic motivation, we all have different reasons for being on the mats on a
Hmm.
daily basis. And obviously, you and I have fallen in love with the game too. We love jiu-jitsu for
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu's sake,
Hmm. Hmm.
and you got to balance both those worlds. But it's
All
like,
right.
to me, belts have become more of just a sign of commitment. It doesn't.
Hmm.
It's not indicative of linear ability. Meaning, like, just because I wear a black belt doesn't mean I'm going to beat every brown belt or purple belt or blue belt that exists in the world. It just means that I've been committed to this thing called jiu-jitsu for a long time.
Yeah.
And for those listening, Aaron's a brown belt, four stripes. That black belt is ever looming. Can't wait for the day to see him get that. Because you'd be hard pressed to find a better human that deserves that black belt. But definitely agree. And so, do you think when you look at people that come into self defense, like that's the reason why they're there? I think a lot of schools mislead people about self-defense, meaning a lot of martial arts schools will sell themselves as being a self-defense studio, right? Because it's safer to say, oh, we teach self-defense. We don't, because they don't want to spar. They don't want to
Hmm.
test their abilities against somebody else. They don't, I'm not even saying the competition is a must, but I'm just saying they don't even want to compete within their own school against their own students,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because they don't want that pressure testing environment. And I know you enough
Hmm.
to know that ain't how you train.
No.
So when you look at self-defense and you compare that to belts, right? What should be kind of an intrinsic versus extrinsic motivator. How do you kind of quantify that with your students, both in jiu-jitsu and in Krav Maga?
Yeah, yeah. So for a while, we had kind of gone away from like our level system. Mainly, a lot of it was because of like my influence in jiu-jitsu, where we got our fundamentals class, and then we'd have an advanced class, right? It's just kind of two quote unquote levels of classes. Fundamentals, the only difference between the two is like we're just not live rolling. And I really encourage that in our self-defense school, because I wanted to see more of this, like this community come around, um, community form around this thing of like we're learning how to protect ourselves and protect one another. So it's like let's throw out levels. Oh, I can't go to level 2 class. I can't go to level 3 class because I'm not there yet. And it's like that's like okay, put that out of your mind right now. Just show up and train. Show up and train. Um, And so what we've started to do is we're moving towards more of like a kind of certificate where it's almost it would function similarly like a stripe would, or even a belt, which is after a certain amount of time, as we see improvement, we're going to acknowledge that improvement in front of the community, the same way that we do when we stripe somebody. But it's going to be less about getting the level and more about the recognition that there's growth happening. Right. So I think like kind of whatever system a school chooses to employ, I think there does need to be some type of recognition and honoring of someone's commitment. Like I love what you said, Randy, about the belt system. I think the beauty of the belt system is it's a recognition of commitment. Right. When you see that belt start to get kind of tattered and worn, you're like this person's putting in work, and like that's a beautiful thing to see. And when you see a black belt and you see those stripes, it's like, okay, this person's put in, again, anywhere from, gosh, 8 to 10 years of hard work. I mean, for anybody who get once you get past blue belt, you're like, bro, that's hard. That is hard. I mean, gosh, as a white belt, I was like, I love this, but this sucks. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing out here, just drowning. But you keep showing up, and like there's something there's there's something that does something to your character, where you can keep showing up on a rough day, going in the gym. Randy, you and I talked about it. Like, I don't know if I want to be here. Almost didn't come, but I did. Right, pushing through injury, pushing through pain, pushing through outside struggles. Like all that stuff matters when you step on the mat and you move towards something good. Like that's so valuable.
No, I completely wholeheartedly agree. I just had a moment the other day training. I was like, man, I'm kind of tired today. I'm kind of beat up. But I came in here with a focus. I wanted to work on my takedowns, and so I look around and I'm like, where are my wrestlers at? And you're like,
Yeah,
this is gonna suck because I'm
yeah,
tired and I'm beat down.
yeah.
And you roll the wrestlers, you know how physical that is.
Oh,
But it's like
hmm
you said, it is character building, and 100% the blue belt thing. What you said right there, so many people experience because you get the blue belt, and that's when you realize like, oh shit, this is a deep, deep river, right?
hmm
And I think that's why a lot of people get those blue belt blues and quit because
Yeah.
it's like, oh, this is going to take more commitment than what I was prepared for. And you either get
Yes.
through that trial by fire and you stick with it, and then you develop exactly what you talked about, the stick to itiveness and the discipline, the commitment, and then you earn your purple belt, and then your brown belt, then your
hmm
black belt. That's 100% agree.
Yeah. I think and I don't know if you guys felt this, but like, like when you're a white belt, you're like, okay, like the upper belts, they'll play with you. They're gonna beat you, but like you're gonna be all right. But I feel like once I became a blue belt, it was like gloves off. Like you are not in the kiddie pool anymore. And I remember just like getting mollywopped. I was like, okay, I thought I had improved. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, you still got a long way to go, kid. So I don't know if you guys felt that, but I remember that distinctly.
Oh, absolutely. Because I know, like, I felt very good about myself because it's funny as I was actually talking to, there's a young kid at the judo gym I go to, and he was having kind of like I need experience. I want to fight right now. And, it's frustrating. And, like, I've been, not depressed, but like, down about it. And I was like, hey, man, you're supposed to be frustrated with it. But so I was like, white belt, it was tough. It was hard. And I thought I was doing good. And I became blue belt. And I was just like automatically the baddest man on earth because any guy in their mid 20s who gets a blue belt somehow in their mind, it just like, I don't know what it is. They're
Yeah.
just like, dude, look, I don't know if you know this. I've got a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but that isn't like the case. So yeah, I got like my ass whooped
Mm.
for like a month and a half of just
hmm
we had a brown belt who just crushed me every day. Every day. It's like,
Yeah.
come on, let's roll. We're the same size. And then he would just he would just kill me every day. And
hmm
but he used to let me just like, oh yeah, that's a really good guard pass. You're doing good. I'm like driving home like, yeah, pass his guard, dude. I'm doing really awesome.
I did it today.
Yeah. Yeah. So I absolutely experienced that.
Yeah.
You can always tell when somebody is in that mindset when they call themselves like a third degree blue belt.
Oh God, yeah, yeah,
You know, telltale sign right there.
Third degree.
yeah.
Oh, I've never heard that. That's good.
Oh yeah,
That's
all the
good.
stripes are your degrees now. So
Mm,
I'm a fourth degree white belt,
yeah.
so very dangerous.
Mm,
So if we remove belts, I'm gonna play the devil's advocate. I don't
hmm
want to remove belts because like as far as commitment, black belt is a sign of commitment. I know we had this conversation about like what a black belt is. This was a few episodes ago. I think that was our
hmm
our strong comeback. I was thinking about it. a couple weeks afterwards because I was talking to somebody. They're like, "Well, you're a black belt. Like, you should be destroying me." And I was like, "I think a black belt is an indication of I'm actually a safe person to roll with. Like,
Mm,
I'm not going to do something wild and like rip your arm out of socket or do a move that I know is like I don't know what's going to happen with it, but like, commitment, safety, all that stuff. So say
mm,
we did away with belts. They're all gone. Do you think we would probably have a harder time keeping people motivated to come in, or would it be
mm.
something like, or we can even go the old school like karate way. You get a white belt and then eventually you get a black belt and that's it.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Oof.
like, what do you think? Would it be a better? Would it be a drop off? Like, what do you think?
That's a good question. I've thought about, what a world would look like if you just gave everybody black belts just like from the jump, only to show that like in some respects they don't mean anything. Meaning, I think to Randy's point, like there's spectrums even within the belt, right? If you're, a competition purple belt versus just a hobbyist, so kind of that spectrum. So yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. But to answer your question, I think what would matter would be like the kind of culture that you would set as a gym, but then that also would be influenced by like the broader culture of just the society that you live in, right? So I think of like Muay Thai in Thailand, like no belts, but national sport. Kids come out the womb and they're fighting, right? It's just what we do. So like I think when something becomes what you do, or even I think like Dagestani wrestling, soccer in Brazil, it's just what we do as a people, and like we would do it even without the glitz and the glam. Like yeah, the World Cup, like we all want that, but like we're gonna be playing the favelas anyway, right?
Yeah.
So I think if we right now in American culture, I think if we did away with belts, I do think there'd be a drop. I think there'd be a bit of a drop off. But I do also think too, though, that it does feel as if like especially Nogi Jiu-Jitsu is moving into that space where wrestling, I think, has had, and I don't want to say used to have because I don't want any wrestlers to come for me if they're listening to this. But it just seems like, yeah, jujitsu is the thing that young kids are doing now versus wrestling, right? And so it does feel like it's becoming more of the culture of at least here in America. But I don't know if we're at a point where we could say, okay, no more belts, and you just show up and you just train, and the mats and competition is going to be how you're judged. I don't know if we're there yet. Because even for the wrestlers that I know, um, it was interesting to hear one of them talk about like the comparisons between jiu-jitsu and wrestling. And one wrestler told me, he said, so like a black belt for you is like a national championship for us. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Because as a wrestler, like yes, there's like no belts, but I think any kid who's a high school wrestler or becomes a college wrestler, they're like winning a national championship. Like that is the pinnacle of the sport, or an Olympic gold medal, right? So it's like it was interesting to hear him kind of compare those two things. So there's always got to be something to shoot for. I think is where I'm landing. But the idea of not having belts, I actually kind of like it because I think you'd come into each class, and even if somebody new showed up, like I don't know where you're at skill wise, so I can't like slack off, right? I've actually got to be prepared, and I think that's you talk about that character formation. I think that that's a good thing to develop.
You think, when I look at it too, you mentioned no gi versus gi, and that's a really hot topic right now as well in grappling because you've got some schools that are going exclusively no gi, some that are saying you can't get belted or call it jiu-jitsu unless there is gi.
Mhm.
That no gi is submission grappling and gi is Brazilian jiu-jitsu. There's all these different
Oh wow, yeah.
dialogues going on and stuff, and I think that might be part of the answer too. Is if you have a school, if you're going to run a school and you don't want to have belts, then just call it submission grappling. I'm not even saying that I agree with the argument that
Hmm.
it's not jiu-jitsu unless there's a gi. I don't think that's true, because you see judo without a gi, right? And you don't see anybody claiming that that's not judo.
Hmm.
But I think that if you were to try to build out a culture where belts weren't present, then you would just call it submission grappling or submission wrestling, and there wouldn't be an expectation of belts. But much to your point, we already have belts. It's already an established system, and there are people that come in and they're looking for that gratification. They're looking for
Hmm.
that recognition of their work and their time. But I think where belts tend to skew it though is this expectation piece,
Right.
the
Yeah.
expectation of abilities, the expectation of, and then also it's subjective how we award belts. Some schools, if you go to a Roy Dean school, they have a actual belt test where you're required to
Hmm.
show so many different manipulations. It may not always be like a scripted. Some schools have scripted, like I want to see this variation of a sweep. I want to see this variation of an armbar. Roy Dean seems like, and I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but if you watch his videos, it seems like he's more like, no, let me see three options from this. Let me see
Hmm.
three options from this. And then you have schools where, like at TFTC, we're pretty much just subjective in general. Like, you've been training here for a long time and you've been
Hmm.
consistent. You're a good representation of the gym. You're a good training partner. And I've seen you hold your own against belts of the one you're going for or higher. And so we
Right.
know that you're competent at that skill level. And so I think that that's part of the argument too, is, what are we doing? And I tend to lean more toward, like, if you just train no-gi, you should still be eligible for belts if you're training in jiu-jitsu, in my opinion. Is it nice to see you in a gi every now and then? Yes, and that's a whole nother discussion, gi versus no-gi, and how it applies. Maybe we can delve a little bit into that, but I definitely I agree with your assessment on that. So if you didn't have belts at all, so let's say hypothetically speaking, you start Aaron Fear's submission wrestling and you have your school and you've got students coming
Hmm.
in and they're training at your gym, right? Um, and let's say it's the majority younger crowd, like, 20s, teens, stuff like that. Sad to say that for me means younger now, but um, how would you then keep people dialed in and motivated to keep pushing for more skill, for more ability without the presence of belt ranks?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think as I've thought about that, the first thing that comes to my mind, and I haven't gone too far down this rabbit hole, but I think just the idea of like publicly um, honoring the students in front of one another, like individually. So kind of like the way we do it TFTC, right? Where we have some come out, we stripe them. Maybe Brad will say a couple words or Adam will say a couple words, like just obviously without the belt, but it's just like it's the words. It's, hey man, like I've seen this in your training, but I think even more so, like I've seen this in your character. And so finding a way to encourage and build the person up. Like we are better because you're here, and we hope you're better because you're here. Right. So, and again, that would kind of be obviously sporadic, which I kind of like the spontaneity of that, where just keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up. And it forces, I think, as the instructor, let me dial in on your game. And you're not just doing the techniques, but like the nuance and the jujitsu IQ is happening, but also like I'm also paying attention to how you're rolling with white belts, how you're rolling with upper belts, how you handle disappointment, listening to your life outside of the gym. How are you contributing to how are you being a functional contributing member of society, right? And how are you building up the folks in this gym, right? So I think the word that I settle on is like honor. Like I would want to find some way to like verbally and publicly honor you in front of the gym. And like that would kind of be the um I guess the bar that we're using, or the measuring rod that we're using to track growth. But also build community. Because I think I mean, I think about it now. I mean, yeah, I love going to the gym, not just to roll, but to like act to chop it up with people, to get to share a life and hear what people are going through, on the mats, off the mats. Like it's such a communal space that I think if we only ever talk jujitsu, I think we're missing out on just the broader human experience.
No, I agree with that because like community building is a huge thing, especially in gyms. And I think, even if it is a competition focused gym, you still have to, like you said, one of the big things is like showing up and having a good time with people you know. Like that's
Yeah.
honestly for me, that's kind of mostly my motivation is I like going to a gym. I know people, chat with them, have a good role with them too, and laugh about it. Um, but the recognition is a huge thing too, and I've noticed that like just even outside of sports in general, like a lot of people just want to be recognized for the hard work they do. Whether it's a job, school, sports, hobby, doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a really good take on how to like, and I'm pro belt all the way. So like I think it's a great like alternate solution to if we didn't have belts. So
Hmm.
that was really really awesome to hear actually.
What if you did like every time somebody unlocked a new move, you played like a sound effect over the speaker, like it's a video game, like achievement unlocked, you know?
That would be
Uh,
amazing.
I also thought about like just doing straight up basic, intermediate, advanced in
Mm.
regards to different classes. And leaving, I'm pro belt too. I think it serves a purpose. As long as people don't skew it outside of what it's supposed to mean.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Like the most beautiful thing about black belt, and it doesn't even require you to have a black belt to do it, is the recognition that wins and losses in the training room don't matter.
Mm.
And when you really tap into the ability to just kind of like try different things or have a focus, a specific focus on this role or this training session or whatever, and work on that. And if it doesn't work, then you just like, all right, whatever, and you keep going. And it doesn't matter if you get tapped or get passed or whatever.
Hmm.
That's when your skill level skyrockets. For me, it took earning my black belt to learn that.
Mm.
So. But that's one of the big gifts of it is that it when you get rid of the linear focus, it's just everything gets easier and better for you. But having
Yeah.
basic, intermediate, advanced classes, and that could just be a very subjective thing, but it would still have more gray. It wouldn't be like a black and white thing. It would just be like, hey, you've been here for a few months, you're looking good, you're looking like you're grasping the concepts. Hey, why don't you start coming to some intermediate classes? Or if
Hmm.
they've been in the intermediate classes for a while and they're doing really good, hey, you're looking pretty solid. Why don't you step it up and go to some of the advanced classes now? And so you're unlocking these different groups to then tap into
Mm.
based on your experience, your commitment, and what you're showing. So we know you'll be safe at that higher level. You're not going to get smashed and hurt. You have the maturity and like you said, the team atmosphere, like the team attitude, enough to go from being. Because when you're basic, when you're brand new as a white belt and this for the first time, you're more about self-preservation. You're just trying to survive, and you don't really have the awareness outside of yourself to know how that impacts other people. Prime example, you're trying to do a mount escape and you're just like freaking out and claustrophobic and trying to survive and you kick the group next to you. Well,
Mm.
now fast forward 10 years and you're a brown belt or a black belt and you're rolling and you're like hyper aware of the fact that there's a group right here to the point where you're like, hey, I'm going to let them sweep me this way just to get me away from this group. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
like there's so many things that come into the scale. So if you did like a basic, intermediate, advanced, and had these, whether it was different class times or different mat space afforded for that, depending on how big your gym is, that was something else I've thought about too. But even still, all that to say, I still think belt ranks or some kind of delineation of rank
Hmm.
matters because there are some people that are very motivated by that. Like that is enough to make them go to another place in their mind, training wise, because they want that other belt so bad. And there have been times in my journey where I knew I was close to brown belt or black belt, and I'm like, God, I want that so bad. What do I got to do to get there? And it is a little extra motivation, you know?
Yeah. 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 I'd say the same thing. And backing up to what you said about, you know, training, kind of the purpose of which you go into training. Yeah. I think I had wished I had learned to prioritize learning in the role versus winning much sooner. I would say that's something I'm doing now. And yeah, I've noticed a greater increase in skill over the last, I would even a couple of weeks because I've been focusing on this particular aspect of my game. But I think early on, it was just like trying to prove like, yeah, like I can do this, and I was, of course, Spazzy white belt. And it's always interesting to hear like the upper belts be like, hey man, like you're not spazzing anymore. And I'm like, Oh, thanks. That's like I thought I was just going hard, but it's true. It's like no, I was being crazy, I was being crazy. Trying to prove something versus learn. And that's I think where what you talked about, Randy, having that basic, intermediate, advanced can really give parameters to each class of like, hey, when we're here, this is like learning, right? So whether that's just straight drilling, and then maybe the intermediate classes, maybe more some of those ecological games that I know you've been implementing and have been implemented across jiu-jitsu over the last couple of years, where it's like very focused learning, right? There's an objective, right? And there's more feedback, right? Partners less compliant, but we're not trying to kill each other. And I think like it's hard, after you get after you're initiated into your first like live role and you're like, what am I actually, what do I do here? Do I just go balls to the wall? Do I just kind of feel this out? Do I just, what do I actually do? I love, if I could go back and do it all over again, I think I would have applied that learning framework, but also I think I would have focused more on like defense and escapes. Yeah, I know this is what like Danaher and like Gordon Ryan and the New Wave team, they emphasize a lot with their newer athletes is like defense and escapes. Because if you can defend and escape and you can't get submitted, like you'll always be in a position to attack. I was like, wow, that's really, really good. So yeah, that'd be I think starting out earlier on, because I think when you're newer, you want to come in, you just want to learn all the cool stuff. Like, I mean, I was coming in like John Wick, bro. Let's do this. Let's do this thing. Like, I'm ready to rock. I'm ready to throw people and shoot them in the head. No, not, didn't want to do that. But it was like you want to learn all the cool stuff versus like the fundamentals. And I think, gosh, it probably wasn't until like I was a purple belt where I felt like, okay, I kind of know like the concepts of each position to not get submitted, but also to be in the best position to get the control and get a tap. Where I think with white and blue belt, I was just drowning in techniques. Just like this, we just did a Kimura, and now we're learning a guillotine. How do we get? It was kind of like piecemeal versus what's the whole picture here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, it's just all, I think it's a way of teaching the basics. I've been to gyms where it's, like you said, piecemeal. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but if
Hmm.
there's a kind of like logical progress for like the techniques they were teaching. So like that's why I really like when there's a fundamentals beginner class and then you have like an intermediate or advanced class. Even like with belts because, like I'm not above avoiding a basics class because everybody can still work on it though. But like even still, a lot of that stuff at white belt and blue belt is overwhelming because, you talk going back to what you're saying, some people show up and they have no athletic anything. So now you're telling them to put their foot here, hold here, sit up, rock back, and do a sweep. And then you get some sort of weird variation of them grabbing the lapels and then just extending their body all the way. Like, I don't understand it. But like I can't say I haven't been there either where,
Hmm.
I still credit Neil and Brian for having the most patience ever with me as a white belt because it is just like I had some athletic ability, but just the ability to retain all those moves was lost on me. I couldn't do it. Like, but
Yeah.
it's yeah,
Hmm.
getting better was the motivation for me, and
Hmm.
like getting belts and competing and stuff. And I think I was thinking about this when we were talking about like wrestling or something else, where what the difference kind of between wrestling and jiu-jitsu is another like to bring it back. Another motivating thing is that they compete like every week. Like,
Hmm.
there's a competition to get ready for every week. So I mean, that's still recognition. So that's kind of I
Right.
guess where my brain put everything together right there. So I apologize for that little bit of a tangent on external motivation for all of it.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with a lot of what you guys are saying as far as having that delineation of I mean I was just rolling with a guy at open mat yesterday and we had a conversation and he was I think he's a blue belt, if I remember correctly. I was asking some questions about, well, what do I do when it's this situation? What do I do when it's that situation? Which is always kind of a loaded question and almost impossible to answer because every time you roll or get into a thing, it's different from the previous, and so it's hard to give that a direct answer. But I told him, I said, if there's ever a time when you're kind of lost, you should default back to trying to get back to good neutral position, at least neutral, right? At least
Mm,
neutral. And he was kind of trying to go and do some kind of like he was trying to skip steps, right? So
mm,
go from being in this technical mount where I'm almost on his back, and he's immediately just trying to re-guard from there. I'm like, well, hold on a minute. There's other things you need to unpack first.
mm,
And so sometimes just getting reoriented toward the person, hands on the inside, good inside position awareness, that should be your default. Don't worry about how you're going to regard from here. Worry about how you're going to get back to a neutral position from which you can regard. And
mm,
the reason I bring that up is because Aaron, you're talking about how there's like this attraction for new people to the fancy, the cool, the pretty, the awesome, and that's the hard part of teaching new people is they want that. And you're like, well, hold on a minute. You've got about 2.5, 3, 4 years before you're even ready to understand why that's a thing. Like
mhm,
form follows function. There's a reason why that move exists in time, but you haven't gotten to the place where that's applicable yet.
mhm,
And so like understanding to me a basics class would still be very much built around some of those games I like to run, but it would be done in a very restricted, constrained fashion, more akin almost to drilling like you're putting it, but in the sense of like what is the outcome we're looking to get out of this student? Like, are we trying to get them to learn how having somebody covering your hips and your chest and mount is a bad thing for you to be on bottom, and that
mhm,
you want to try to either become get out and end up on top, or you want to try to get your feet back to where you can use them again, right?
mhm,
And so then it would be built around that idea, and the benefit of that is it kind of it almost like masks the need for fancy through the virtue of kind of like live overcoming live resistance. Does that make sense? Because
mhm,
I feel like sometimes the reason why people want the novelty of a fancy thing is because they're drilling something without any resistance or any context. And it's like you're watching a movie and we all love John Wick is amazing. And we all want to do what John Wick does because it looks cool on screen, but we're not putting the context of the situation in there either. Because being a Krav instructor and dealing with that self-defense realm, that a lot of times people get caught up in the novelty there too.
mhm,
And they want to do fancy, cool looking things when a fight is anything but fancy and cool. It's vicious, it's violent, it's dirty, it's ugly, it's sloppy. And even highly trained people, when they get into a real fight, it looks like dog shit when they fight.
mhm.
So I don't, kind of a little tangent of my own, but it all kind of connects. To me, it all comes together in the sense of when you're new and you don't have the context, you don't have the awareness, you don't have awareness of your surroundings, you don't have awareness of how to move your body, but you also don't have awareness of what this thing looks like and why we do what we do. And I think that's why it's so important I think belts help fulfill that purpose so that I can look at the room and I can say, relatively new, relatively experienced, very experienced, you know what I mean? And that can help
Mhm.
guide my practice and it can also help guide like partner selection or whatever. But it just sometimes gets skewed out of whack. So that's my thought.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember years ago reading an article. It was like the 80-20 principle, like in applied to jiujitsu. Um, and this was kind of around the time I was purple belt. I was looking for ways to kind of almost like systematize what I was learning because again, I was still kind of feeling like I was drowning. Um, and this particular article was talking about like, if you look at the highest percentage techniques in jujitsu at like the black belt versus black belt level, right? When you're, black belt versus a white belt, like, yeah, that's cat and mouse, right? You could do anything you want. But like when it came to skill versus skill, what was being relied on was like the basics. Nobody was doing fancy stuff. No one was doing fancy things. And, they kind of even broke down like the submissions. And I was like, that's really incredible. And then I think, this was kind of around the time when, Gordon Ryan, was really just on a tear. And you just watching him do the same things over and over and over again. And it's it's the fundamentals and the basics done at a master level, and you see what he's been able to do. And really, I mean, just a lot of the Danaher guys, right? Because they whittle down the amount of techniques and they focus on getting good at a few, right? The basics, fundamentals, like you mentioned, good position and how that sets you up for success. Even like Roger Gracie, I think he's been on record saying like to be good in jiu-jitsu, he said you only need like 10 moves. I was like, 10? You're just one of the goats talking about like of the thousands that exist, choose 10. Like it was mind blowing, but also like really reassuring that like, okay, like just because I learned something cool and flashy in class doesn't mean I actually have to do it, especially if it doesn't fit like my game and my style. You mentioned for the blue belt, it was like, what do I do here? It's like, well, who are you as an athlete is going to determine a lot of that too. Like as a bigger guy, like I'm just more about pressure, get on top, heavy pressure, wear you out, right? Smaller guy, that's probably not going to be your game, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you don't need to learn pressure in the same way that I don't need to learn how to be more finesse. But, understanding who you are as an athlete goes so much into, okay, where do I go from here? And like you mentioned, Randy, I think that's where those games can come into play. So you can kind of figure out, okay, I'm good at this and this not so much.
If this where you know, recognize that Bruce Lee was so ahead of his time when he talked about like, how martial arts is like the most honest self-expression.
Mm,
When I was younger, it didn't make sense to me. I'm like, how is martial arts self-expression? I'm punching this dude in the face. I don't really understand. But it makes sense now in hindsight because exactly what you're talking about. He's talking about how do you, like you said it better than I ever could. And I don't remember exactly how you said it, but basically expressing yourself as an athlete, your attributes, your experience, your height, your weight, your the way you think and see the world, all that stuff, how you express yourself on the mats is an expression of who you are as a person. I think
yeah.
it even goes back to character, like you talked about too. Your
Hmm.
patience with your training partners and letting them work a little bit and having the self control to let that happen and all
Hmm.
that. And then something else, real quick, wrestlers. We talked about wrestlers a lot in the episode today, and getting back to neutral position and also. Roger Gracie talking about the only having like 10 moves that you have to be really good at. When I watch college wrestling, one of the things that always amazes me, especially if you look at like the finals where every little inch matters,
Hmm.
right? Um, they will fight over grips like it's their life.
Yeah.
And not much will change in their position initially. It's just literally fighting over who can roll the wrist, get an underhook, or who can get that 2-on-1, or who, you know what I mean? The
Hmm.
head level, like they're just fighting head level, like the smallest little details. And I feel like those are the things that a lot of new students miss out on is how crucial those minuscule details are, and how that's
Hmm.
actually where your battle is. It's not always that beautiful finish of that picture perfect double because seldom do you see that at the pinnacle level of college wrestling. You don't see some
Hmm.
perfect double leg shot with this huge slam. It happens every now and the crowd goes crazy because it doesn't happen often. It's
Right.
usually a battle over grips in inches, and then somebody managed to scoop a leg and shelf it, and then there's just a battle over if he can actually finish it or not for the points. But that's grappling.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it is like those tiny little, I think what's his face? Oh my gosh, Hickson Gracie, we call like invisible jujitsu.
Yeah.
Like all the little details that just like why can't I hold you why can't I hold you down? Or like why was that armbar so tight? Like that felt tighter than anything I've ever felt before. Yeah.
No, that's the cool part about it because I remember somebody explained to me early on. It's like, when you start getting higher up in rank too, like some of these very high level guys, it's no longer a matter of like where you put like the arm. It's basically like what very specific like angle do you have like the
Mm,
arm at? Like if that makes sense. It's a matter of like millimeters at that point versus like just God, just get your hand deeper in there for the cross collar choke. Like don't start it here. You got to go all the way
yeah.
back there. But now it's like how much do you curl your wrist or how tight do you, like what grip do you have? So
Hmm.
I find stuff like that very very cool when you get up there.
Yeah.
But it's like you said with the John Wick stuff, you got to get to that point where you understand why it works a certain way and why you do it that way. Otherwise, you're gonna
Hmm.
like face plant when you throw somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think even I think Randy, you kind of mentioned it, but how Hollywood and cinema has impacted how we view fighting. This is like one, obviously, we know it's scripted, but like we kind of wish, like we wish it wasn't. Like we wish all fights went down this way. But it's like there's also a lot of stuff in John Wick where like I think it was in the last, especially the last one, where I started like in my mind, I was keeping track of like, okay, that's unnecessary jujitsu. It's like, yeah, there was no reason to do that in that situation with all these bullets flying. Like, this flies in the face of every tactical decision you could ever make. Like this is not the one you want to make. So like even bringing people back to reality of like this is it's gonna look messy. Like I think the first time you kind of nail a submission and you get there, yeah, you might be surprised, like kind of how sloppy it was. That it wasn't like this tight, perfect thing that looks super crisp, like when you were drilling, right? So like, allowing the reality to set in for people, and then once it does set in, it's like, hey, push through it because it does get easier instead of where I think the tendency is just despair, and then we're gonna give up.
Yep. Well, I do appreciate we got to wrap up the episode unfortunately, but really do wish Hollywood fights were like real life because then you can still be like, well, the guy's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, so obviously he's going to beat everybody, and I'd go back to being the most dangerous person ever uh, in my own mind. But no, Aaron, we really appreciate you coming on the show today and talking with us about Brazilian jiu-jitsu and your martial arts journey and some of the topics that we brought up. So it's been a really good conversation, and like I said, thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Anytime. And ladies
And
and gentlemen, oh, sorry, go ahead.
real quick, man, before you call
Yeah.
it, I think we definitely want. I want to try to bring him back on because I think there's a whole other side of Aaron we can get into in regards to some of the things you talked about character and leadership and some other things like that and building a culture. I feel like that's something that Aaron is very humble about, but is very strong at, and so I think we can probably have a whole another episode based on that as well if he's interested.
Definitely would
But,
love to.
but
You put him
definitely
on the
love
spot.
having you on.
You put him on the spot on an
He,
episode. So
dude, he's ready, man. Aaron, people don't know this, man, but Aaron is he's our secret weapon at TFTC, man. And he's just an awesome training partner. So I definitely wanted to get him on. So thank you, bro.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's another episode of the Big Jiu Jitsu Show. I'm Rob,
I'm Randy.
and we'll catch you guys next time.